Welcome to the Growth Now Movement. I'm your host, Justin Shank. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, and podcaster who years ago decided to go on a journey on how to grow in all areas of my life. What I found out was it's really a matter of focusing on the 4 pillars of life: business, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. And that's what we do here. We explore how to continuously grow in those areas, all while having a ton of fun doing it. I'm really excited you're on this journey with me. Now let's get to this week's episode. This week, I sit down with Ricky Williams. You guys know Ricky as the Heisman Trophy winning Pro Bowl NFL running back, but we get into so much more in this episode, and I think you guys are absolutely going to love it. Now, as some of you may know, in the middle of his accomplished NFL career, Ricky found cannabis and everything changed. At the time, it became synonymous with the negative stereotype of the lazy stoner. Undeterred by people's ignorance and inspired by the desire to understand his fascination with cannabis, Ricky set off to study the origins of cannabis in the foothills of the Himalayas, which we dive into in this episode. And Ricky now lives with this wisdom of what he discovered on his journey. And yes, it does include smoking weed daily. I also talk about my squareness of never smoking weed in my life, and he got a good laugh out of that. Now, this part is actually really cool. We dive into Ricky's journey of discovering astrology. The real healer is what he believes. 16 years ago, Ricky began a lifelong study and practice of astrology. All Eastern healing systems proclaim that the root of all illness is ignorance of our true nature, and astrology is an excellent map and guide to finding and understanding ourselves. You're going to hear Ricky's passion about astrology and how it's not only changed his life, but it's changed so many people's lives that he's helped one-on-one or in classes and trainings, and we talk all about that. As a matter of fact, Ricky is now the CEO of a company that has launched a relationship app that centers around astrology and wellness and all those amazing things, and I think you guys are going to truly love it. We talked briefly about the 4 pillars, which you guys know about, and how what he's doing with astrology really fits into all of them. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy the conversation I have here. We had a ton of fun, really enjoyed connecting with Ricky, and I think there's going to be a ton of takeaways for you to really implement into your life and maybe even open your eyes to something new that you haven't thought about. So make sure you guys take notes, enjoy this conversation, listen to it multiple times because there's a ton of great nuggets from Ricky himself. Now, before we get to the episode, I want to ask a favor of you guys. If you can head over to iTunes, leave me a rating and review. I love reading every single one of them, and I appreciate you guys so much. Now, without further ado, let's get to this episode with Ricky Williams. Ricky, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, I am so excited about diving into this conversation just because of where you are now versus how I was introduced to you, which is the draft that the Eagles should have drafted you, but we got Donovan McNabb, and so I'm from the Philly area, so you know this.
Yes.
And so that's where I was introduced to you and who you are. So people know you as a Heisman Trophy winner, as a Pro Bowler, but you've gone on to become a cannabis expert, a healer, a yoga instructor, an astrologist, and now a podcaster. And so many exciting things that I want to dive into your life. So why don't we start with who's Ricky today, and then we'll get into how you got there. We're going to dive into all the things, man. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you just answered that question for me. And if I was describing myself, I would say that I'm an astrologer. But to me, underneath astrologer is healer, yogi. There's even a little bit of football player in there too. And so I think that's really what, as I'm in midlife right now, I'm becoming more of an integrated person, where I think along my path was the journey of integration of, finding, there's parts of me over there and there's parts of me over there, and just that gathering process of gathering those pieces, and then the integration process of how do they fit together. And that's been the journey. And not that it's over, but I'm at this point now where I feel more integrated as an astrologer. So even my podcast, we're talking astrology. I'm the CEO of a startup, and it's an astrology startup, and the healing work I do is based in astrology. And so astrology is that piece that weaves everything together for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about that for a second. Like, let's start there since we're there, right? What drew you into astrology? What was the thing that was like, I want to dive deeper into this and study, and then become a healer through it? What drew you to it?
It was a personal experience. I mean, I was looking for something, but had no idea I was looking for astrology. And I was living in Northern California at the time studying Ayurveda. And part of our Ayurvedic coursework was we were learning yoga. And so we had yoga teachers come and teach us. And there was a yoga ashram like 25 minutes from the school. And so one of the swamis from the ashram came to the school to teach yoga. And again, I didn't know what I was looking for, but obviously I was a football player in a Ayurvedic school, so I was searching for something. And after this yoga class, I had this like intense, deep relaxation and peace that I had never experienced in my life. And so I was compelled to go up to the Swami in all of his orange, clothes and say, where can I get more of this? Where can I get more of this? I'm a junkie. All right, I admit it. So he said, there's an ashram down the road. You should come check it out. And so that weekend I went to the ashram, took the yoga class in the morning, and I was in heaven. It's like a spiritual retreat. And I felt at home. And the main teacher there came up to me. Her name is Swami Sita. And someone had told her I was a football player. So she came up to me and she said, "Where's your Mars?" And I know now that Mars is the planet of aggression and assertion. And she was just curious of where is a football player's Mars. And so it turned into this conversation where I gave her the rest of my birth information and she looked at my chart. And, after spending about 2 hours with her, I felt seen. At a time where I was really lost. And in 2 hours, a lot of my questions started to be answered. And I attribute it partially to this woman's wisdom, but also to the tool that she used, astrology. And so she started to teach me what she knew about astrology. And I became fascinated because it was the first thing that I found in my life that helped me really make sense of how chaotic the world seems. And more specifically at the time, how chaotic my inner world seemed.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
This was 2004, the end of 2004.
Okay. Yeah. Very, very cool. Yeah. So it's funny that I mentioned before I hit record that I'm a triple Virgo. And I was speaking at PodFest in Florida, and I met a group of people there, and one of them is into astrology, and we ended up taking an Uber back to the hotel from where we were, and she started asking me all these questions because I was like, yeah, I'm a Virgo. I'm pretty much and I knew like the basics, right? Like I am a Virgo, and I come across as a Virgo. Like I get all that stuff. I was a step or two ahead of those little color scrolls you can buy at convenience stores, right?
Yeah.
And she starts asking me all these questions, like, what time were you born? Like all this stuff. And she's like, oh, well, you're triple Virgo. And she went in for like 20 minutes on this Uber ride. And I was like, oh my God, like all of this is so on point and it explains so much, right? It explains who I am, why I am, all these things. And obviously completely different experience from your introduction to it than mine, but it's interesting. And so that obviously began your journey into astrology. What has made it your life purpose? Like now, like you can go on your website and book some time to work with you in this kind of thing. Like what's made it your life journey?
Just the appreciation. So I'm a Virgo rising. All right. And one of the things about Virgo is Virgo has this gift of the ability to appreciate useful tools, right? Things that make us more efficient, things that work. Okay. And so just using astrology in my own life, I just kept seeing like, it just kept helping my life. It gave me more clarity, helped me understand my life, helped me understand other people in my life. And so it wasn't even something that I planned to do. It's just something that kind of took over, this idea of follow your bliss. Is I felt like I didn't really have much of a choice. Is every time I tried to move away from astrology, I would see something and it would bring me right back. And it's interesting because astrology has helped me understand and make sense of my journey. And my journey, if anyone who's followed it, has been very up and down and tumultuous and around the corner and really quite crazy. And the truth is, when I look at it through an astrological lens, it all makes sense, right? It all makes sense. And I think that's the beauty of it is that, my grandma used to say, God don't make junk, and the chart helps you realize that, it helps you appreciate what's different about you, not what's right about it or what's wrong about it. And I think once we appreciate our uniqueness, it's easier to express that uniqueness.
Yeah, no, I love that too. And obviously, if anybody does a little bit of research in you, they know that your father was a pastor, and you just mentioned your grandmother talking about God. I think a lot of people have an issue bridging the gap between Christianity and spirituality. And how does it all work together? How have you been able to do that? Obviously, being raised in the church and now being open to this, what some would call crazy thing of astrology and spirituality and all these other things.
Well, the weird thing is through the course of the ups and downs of my life, I realized that they're not different. That they're not different. The same basic template that was set growing up with the dad that's a pastor and grandparents on both sides that have their own church, being in church like 3 days a week is really at the foundation of who I am. And so, and I think that's that moment when I met Swami Sita and we started talking astrology. I think it was like a reawakening of that, the root, my foundation. And I think at the core of religion, it's supposed to be this binding of our belief system in the way that we live, right? So that we live a life that feels expansive, that feels hopeful, that feels aligned with our values. And I think this is the purpose of religion. It connects the spiritual realm with the earthly realm. And I think, everything to grow has to disintegrate. And I think, in our human history, spirituality, religion specifically has disintegrated over the past couple of 100 years. And I think it's disintegrated so that it could dissolve all the old toxic parts of religion so that it could be rebuilt as something that works better. And my sense is that astrology offers us that, because it gives us the ability to, in essence, create our own personal relationship with the cosmos, right? And where religion becomes something that's individual, that we can share with other people, but it's not rooted in some kind of dogma that pulls us outside of ourselves. And so I think it's been this natural evolution of me truly looking for religion after, in some ways, the early form of Christianity I was brought up in failed me. And so this kind of seeking for a way to make sense of the world. And I feel really compelled by that passion to, one, make sense of the world for myself, but in realizing how it's helped me heal some like really horrible things in my life, realizing that this might be something that's useful and valuable to other people.
Yeah. You've mentioned now a couple of times your journey in life and what we've seen in the public eye of, in the NFL, and then choosing marijuana to help you cope with the social aspect of social anxiety that you were dealing with and all that stuff. I'd love to dive into that. And when was the first realization that you were like, something doesn't seem right? And you began to explore that, okay, is this social anxiety? What's going on here? Was that before, because I don't know this, was it before the NFL? Was it during, was it in childhood? When did that start to kind of crop up for you?
Yeah. Well, I'm a pretty like open-minded person and resilient person. And so, really up until college, my senior year, end of college, I pretty was able to tolerate like the ups and downs of life. It was, and I think the reason is because I had football. Football was like, I could always go back to football, and it made everything right. And the fact that I was such a good football player, it made a lot of other things, made people gloss over other things. And so it really wasn't until I got into the NFL and a lot of negative publicity, injuries. And so my identity, the thing that had buffered me and protected me from life in a lot of ways was my identity was disintegrating, right? So that it could be rebuilt stronger and better. And so this was the process, and it just, happened in the public eye. And so it was letting go of this identity that I was just a football player and realizing that there was something more. And, I think of social anxiety disorder, and social being around people, anxiety doesn't feel good, and there's something wrong. To me, if you look at it plainly, it says maybe you shouldn't be there, And I think the message that I learned about being a football player is yes, I had the athletic ability to be and the physical body to be able to be successful, but I didn't have the heart or the soul to survive in such a brutal environment. And so the message I finally got was get out. One, two, there's a lot of healing that needs to be done because of what it takes to be a professional football player. And then the end result is because I've been on that journey, I have some kind of healing, advice offering to offer other people in similar situations.
Yeah, no, I love that you shared that. And you said something about how you have to be willing to let go of the identity that you've had for so long to find an identity that's better for yourself. And that's such a power. And I don't remember exactly how you said it, something similar to that, but it's such a powerful statement because so many people get stuck in this is who I'm supposed to be, or this is what I've been for so long that they can't escape it, which leads into depression, anxiety, suicide, addiction, all these things. Right. And so in my personal story, I have a close tie to addiction because my mom had a 20-year opioid addiction. Right. And there could have been other forms of rehabilitation for her. Unfortunately, it ended up taking her life. And, I look at that and go, wow, such a powerful statement to realize that. What would you say to somebody where you can potentially pull from your own personal journey? What would you say to somebody who's a little bit stuck where they've lost their identity, but they're not willing to let it go? What can they do to begin to let that go?
Ooh, so, to me,
sorry, I'm hitting you hard, man.
No. It's a great question. It's a wonderful question, and I appreciate it. But to me, the answer is you have to go pretty deep. And you talked about the four pillars, and I think this is why spirituality is one of the four pillars, because at the bottom of it, right, at the end of the day, right, at the end of the day, we're spirit, and so at our core level, we're spirit. And I think, I think, what does that mean? So I think of the source of where we come from, right? That we can all experience, living life in a superficial level, right? And then we can experience when we're around our families and people that we're comfortable, we're a little bit more internal. When we're by ourselves, we're a little bit more internal. When we have a meditation practice or, cannabis, ayahuasca, whatever, we go to this deeper place, right? That's what I'm talking about when I say ultimately that we're spiritual. And I think from that, I think of it as like a bubbling source, right? From that comes the more superficial parts of ourselves. And I think, so they have to go and serve a purpose, and then they have to withdraw, reorient, and then come back out. And so I think if you don't have some kind of spiritual frame of reference, you're going to get stuck because you don't have a conscious connection to the well from which inspiration, vision, a new identity can spring from. And at this time in my life where I felt this disintegration, it was scary, but the natural impulse was to move towards spirituality. And so when I walked away from the NFL, I wasn't consciously thinking about it, but I was naturally drawn to read everything I could about Jesus. I don't know where it came from, but I just became fascinated by this symbol because it somehow was resonating deeply with my experience. And I think moving in that direction, it guided me. And so I received a vision and I was guided and it took me exactly where I needed to go. And so someone in that position, I would point to any form of connecting to some deeper part of yourself from which, that new vision or that new identity emerges.
Such a great answer. So I'm curious how, I read, I think it says it on Wikipedia, that when you went and played for the Canadian Football League for a year, you chose to play with Toronto so you could teach a free yoga class. Is that accurate? I always wonder whether Wikipedia is true or not.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. So at the time that I went to play in Canada, I was living in an ashram. I was living at that same ashram with Swami Sita. And so I was teaching yoga on a daily basis, and it was becoming, much more a part of my life. And again, I talked about integration, and I was trying to integrate this spiritual yogic side of myself with the football side of myself. And it was really difficult to do in the States, but there I saw in going to Toronto this unique opportunity where football is not such a big deal, and most of the people in Toronto, if they saw me, they wouldn't recognize who I was. And so it was an opportunity for me to like literally go from football practice, you know, go home, change, get on my bike, ride to the yoga studio and teach yoga. And so it gave me an ability to integrate a safe place to integrate these two parts of myself. And I remember at the talent show, you know, so I was a rookie technically in Toronto. And, you know, there's kind of this debate of, do we make him like participate in the rookie talent show? You know, and I was a good sport. I was like, I'm a rookie, so I'll do it. And I did a yoga posture called the Scorpion. It's an impressive looking posture, but I did that in front of my teammates. And it just was, again, it was a great opportunity for me to work, to concentrate on that integration process.
Now, I imagine, are football players now doing yoga? Like, it's so much more accepted at this point, right?
More football players are doing yoga. I doubt they're doing the type of yoga that I was doing. Type of yoga I was doing was really spiritual yoga, as we did the postures as preparation for meditation. No. But definitely, I think, you know, even if you're only doing yoga for the physical benefits, you receive the spiritual benefits. It's connected. You know, when you're paying attention to your breathing and your mind is calmed down and your body's relaxed, right? You know, you're gonna have more energy. You're gonna be more insightful. Things in your life are gonna flow more smoothly.
Yeah, you know, I had mentioned my girlfriend's a yoga teacher, and at the retreat that we just ran, we have yoga every morning. And one of the individuals wrote a review of the retreat, and they said, before this weekend, yoga to me was just exercise, and after this weekend, it's a spiritual connection. And it was like, for her, it was like this mind blowing, wow, I can't believe I brought that to somebody, because to her, it's so much more than just exercise. Obviously, you get the benefits of it, right, physically, but yeah, and it's so true. And there are different. I know I'm not the greatest yogi in the world, but I know that there's different types and all that stuff. And I couldn't do Scorpion. Just saying.
Well, you know, the truth is, the word, if we go to the core, the word yoga comes from the root word that means yoke, to combine. And so really the word yoga means anything you do to improve yourself, to have a deeper connection with yourself is considered a yoga.
That's cool. I had no idea. That's actually really, really cool to know. So as you're going through, you know, this entire journey, what do you do regularly to continuously connect with yourself? Because like you said, you're finally at a place now where you're starting to really begin it, you know, sharing it publicly with your podcast. And I saw that you were just on, I forget whose show it was. Shanahan? No. Whose show?
Shannon Sharp.
Yeah. Shannon Sharp show. Yeah. And you opened up about a lot of that stuff, and which was phenomenal. But like, what do you continuously do as you continuously grow? Because, you know, in the spiritual world, you're never quite there. What are you doing on a regular basis to tap into your inner self and continue to move forward? Is it meditation? What else are you exploring?
Yeah, definitely meditation is a big part of it. I think it's a great daily reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in, like, you know, work and kids and all the external stuff, that for me, I need that daily reminder. Also, Tai Chi and Qigong, I think coming from an athletic background, again, it's an integration of the meditative practice and martial arts. Mars, you know, where's my Mars? Martial arts. So that's how I take care of myself physically and spiritually and mentally. Every morning, I'm reading. I'm reading. So this morning I'm reading a book, mainly an astrology book, but just getting looking at things from different angles, I'm a Gemini, and this is what Gemini is about, looking at things from different angles, looking at things. So yeah, that's how I feed myself. And because I have my chart, I know how to take care of myself. And so, and it's one of those things that I found, and I'm noticing this with more people I speak to about their chart, is I'm realizing that I think the ultimate value of astrology is it's affirmation that you're on the right path. Affirmation that you're on the right path. You know,
I love that.
I think that to me, the best readings are I talk to people and I'm not giving them anything new. It's just affirming that voice, that quiet voice that's on the inside that doesn't get a lot of play. You know, when a good reading, I'm speaking to that voice and people feel more affirmed and being themselves.
I love it. I love it, man. So I want to shift gears really quick, and I want to talk because you're widely known as an advocate for cannabis and using it for medical uses, and obviously that came from your time in the NFL when you noticed that these guys are, they're pumping you full of drugs and shots and all these things to keep you on the field, and you started to explore marijuana at that time. Now, fun fact, I've never smoked marijuana in my entire life. I do enjoy a good dose of CBD before I go to sleep, but I've never done it. It just has never called my name. But I'm an advocate. I'm an advocate for it to be legalized and for it to be used for these things because I've seen it. I've seen the benefits of it. And so I want to dive into, how did that journey begin for you? To realize the benefits of it, to start using it on your own, and then where do you see it going in the future? Because I mean, from where you started, it's such a world of difference now. I mean, even the NFL has changed their stance, right?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. People are changing their attitude, and it's part of a long, complicated history. But as far as we know, is it began like most other plant medicines, as something that people noticed in their environment that added something to the quality of their lives. And then as it evolved, it became politicized and, became a big thing, became illegal. And so there's part of that story. But I guess where my personal experience, I feel, is rooted to the deeper story of, I found that something in my environment contributed to the quality of my life. And I mean, I think it's impossible now to deny the medicinal qualities of cannabis. But for me, it's always been mainly, I would call it spiritual medicine, and what I mean by that, I talked earlier about spirit, but I remember, I told this story in Shannon Sharp's podcast. Got me a nasty email from Julie, from my ex, but anyways, so I was going through something. There's a lot of stress, right? And things were feeling like overwhelming for me. And my friend, said, "Here, like, smoke this." And so I did. And for that night, things calmed down. I had perspective. I could make different connections. It opened me up to looking at things in a different way that freed me. And I truly believe that one time and just that release contributed to me winning the Heisman Trophy, because I think when we're too stressed and too bogged down and overwhelmed, we can't function. So I think in that sense, it is performance enhancing. The way anything is that helps us not only relieve stress, because we can relieve stress by trying to escape things. But I think the best use of cannabis is it helps us relieve stress because it changes our perspective. We see things that we didn't see, and we see, oh, this makes sense, and the stress is relieved. In that sense, it's spiritual medicine. And to me, I think, in my opinion, I think that's the main way it works as physical medicine. When we're more relaxed and more open and more receptive, our bodies function more efficiently. But again, like anything, right, it can be used as an escape. And I think in life, we all need an escape. There's a positive escape where we go and we receive perspective and inspiration, and we come back and we're better equipped to deal with life. But there's other ways we escape and we just run away, and we come back and we're more ill-equipped to deal with life. But for me, I think it's really spiritual medicine. And honestly, I see in the future, hopefully, we evolve to a place where we don't need this kind of spiritual medicine, because I think the idea of medicine is it's treating something. And I think, the past couple of 100 years, we've become so, rational and materialistic and scientific that spiritually we're sick. And so I think we need to heal ourselves. And I think that's why cannabis is becoming so prevalent. But I think once we find balance, maybe 15, 20, 30, 40 years, I think you'll start to see it fade more into the background.
Yeah. Do you think as a whole, humanity is waking up a little bit?
For sure. No doubt about it. I mean, I think we have to. I mean, I think a lot of people will say it's not happening fast enough. A lot of people were saying it's happening too fast. I saw a story about I don't want any more like woke products, you know? And so, so, you know, I think an appreciation that, yes, you know, we are waking up, and waking up is not always comfortable. And some people it's are more comfortable with it, and some people have a really difficult time.
Yeah, dude.
And having
so
compassion.
True.
And having compassion, I think that's the most important thing. Is having compassion, is realizing people that are fighting it, they're not bad people. It's just appreciating that for some people, the status quo has been comfortable, and it's hard to, you know, to wake up.
Yeah, change is scary, man. And waking up is a massive change for so many people. I've being introduced to the spiritual space over the last couple of years of my life, mainly through this podcast. And again, we cover all the 4 pillars on the show. It's spirituality, it's business, it's relationships, it's wellness. It's all 4 of those. But opening my eyes to spirituality and how much is happening around us without us even knowing has been such a game changer for me. To be good with life. My stress levels are lower. Like there's just so, you know, you don't have to worry about as much. It's unreal. Also, by the way, side note, I can't believe your ex actually reached out to you after hearing that story. How long ago was that? Like, that's unreal.
It was interesting. I realized, okay, there's still some unresolved stuff there. It was an interesting, interesting experience. Cause I tell that story a lot, you know, but I keep it surface level.
Yeah.
You know, but Shannon, I didn't know, you know, he's a double cancer. So he's like, he just went in, and I was kind of taken aback. And I have this impulse to be honest when people ask me a question. And so I was only expressing my experience of it. And, you know, and so she reached out on LinkedIn. She called my mom. So it was,
jeez.
Yeah.
That's too good, man. But yeah, I mean, and it's sorry, I had to say it. I was like, Jesus. But it's true. And so you talk about plant medicine, right? And, you know, starting with cannabis, and you can go into, there's things like ayahuasca and all these other things. But you'd also mention the state of people abusing it, right? People using it for the wrong things as well. This is actually a conversation my girlfriend and I just had. I've never done ayahuasca either. I'm a square, whatever you want to call me. But so I've never done ayahuasca either. I have many friends who have, but we just talked about how even like hallucinogenics, which have a great healing process to them, they're being overused and overutilized by, you know, former addicts or people who identify as former addicts. Are you seeing that as well in the space?
I am. Yeah, I've noticed it too, but I think that's one of the side effects when something is stigmatized or it's made a taboo, is that we don't talk about it. And so the abuse tends to go up. And for me, I think the way I look at it, that it's treating a spiritual disease. And I think to utilize any kind of medicine properly, you have to be aware of what you're treating. And I think when we can recognize our, you know, where we're stuck spiritually as just what's been handed down to us, and that allows us to use these substances, but also using yoga, meditation, sex, tantra. These are all things that can be abused, but also can be used in these ways. And so I think if we're more aware, I think that's always the solution. But if we're more aware, then we can use these things more to our advantage and less to our detriment. Yeah.
You have to do the inner work, right? Like you have to realize what's the root cause of all this trauma, right? And
why am I doing this? I think that's the question, you know. And I think, to me, maybe a controversial point of view, if someone is using something, right? If we can have a conversation about it and they're conscious of it, then to me, you know, what gets me is when people are unconscious about things, because that's when it becomes dangerous.
Dude, I love that you said that. So one thing I get to do because of this podcast is I get to talk to some of the most successful people in the world, however you want to define success. So my question for you is, what is your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
So my definition of success, think of it a couple of ways. One is that you get paid to be yourself. You know, however that looks, right? However that looks, you get paid to be yourself. And the other one is that you don't ever have the feeling of I'd rather be somewhere else. You know, that's how I define success.
I love it.
And I think doing every day, I think of more in terms of long-term decisions that support success, right? So for instance, my wife, I view my choice of a partner is something I don't do it on a daily basis, but it's something that I've committed to, and I commit to working on that relationship on a daily basis as something that supports success, because one of the things is, for the most part, if I'm somewhere doing something and my wife is there, I don't have that feeling of I'd rather be somewhere else, and yeah, so that's an example. I think too, I think my daily practice of feeding myself, so I know that as a Gemini that I'm activated by new information. And so I make sure on a daily basis to expose myself to new information. And then I think the third is cultivating the art of listening to your heart, of listening to it. You don't always have to do what it says, but just listening to it, right? Because I think, when we stop listening, we shut off that ability and we lose contact with who we really are. And I think we've all experienced those feeling of being lost sometime. And so for me, it's been important, a daily reminder to check in and literally I say heart, how are you doing today? Right? What do you need?
Yeah. Dude, and the astrology stuff, and it's so funny. I can see you light up every time you mention a sign, every time you talk about it. Like, you can tell it's your true passion. It's insanely intriguing. Like when it was introduced to me and they're like, oh yeah, you're a triple Virgo. But by the way, my girlfriend's also a Virgo. She's not a triple Virgo though. I believe she's I don't know what else she is, but she's not a triple Virgo, which is why we balance each other out, even though we're two Virgos. But, it's an intriguing thing. So with that being said, how do people get a hold of you to learn more about what they're going through, to learn more about their signs and to potentially get a reading? Where's all the good information for that?
Yeah. So on my website, rickywilliams.life, people can book time with me. And, I don't like to call them readings. I like to call them conversations, because what I've realized is the truth is the person I'm talking to, they know their chart better than I do. I just know the language. And so I try to put people in touch so they can recognize these different impulses, these different urges, these different parts of themselves. So they can make sense of them and not feel so, tossed in the wind. But also, I realized that my own personal time is limited. And so to try to scale, my vision for astrology, I've created a relationship app. Because I truly believe, and I mentioned my wife, Linnea, I think the most direct path to spiritual development is a committed relationship. Because, once you get in those relationships, all the stuff comes up, right? And so
Amen, man.
All the stuff comes up, and that's where the work is to be done. At least that's my experience. And so I've created a relationship app called Heylila that uses astrology to first help people understand themselves and their own relationship needs, and then to understand other people and connect to other people. Because I think relationships are so much more dynamic and fun when you truly see the other person and not just projecting your stuff onto them. And so at least that's what I found in my life. And so we've created a tool that helps people do just that.
Is that available on Apple and Android? What's all the good stuff about that app?
Yeah. So people can find out more about the app at heylila.com. It's HEYLILA.com. And we're in beta right now. And so people can go on the website and sign up if they want to be a part of the beta. It's fun. It's cool. I know you talk about business and relationships and spirituality and wellness, right? And I think this app really does, at least my experience of it, really does combine all three, because I'm taking, spirituality and relationships and turning it into a business that promotes wellness. Yeah. And it's been a fascinating journey as a CEO of a startup, and my football experience is really come into play as far as putting together really an amazing team. And it's different. I was the workhorse running back, and now I'm like the head coach. And so it's hard not to want to jump in and do everything, to kind of stay back and just hold the vision and make sure that it's executed. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the process.
It's a little bit easier on the body, not so much for the sleep though. I imagine you've had some sleepless nights in this process.
Yes, exactly. I like I said, I appreciate now coaches talking about how they don't sleep. But I like it because, what I found is my mind lasts longer than my body does. And the truth is it's something that can keep developing. And so I've really enjoyed and again, Virgo rising, and Virgo is really about enjoying the process of developing competence, of becoming better at what you do. And so process of having something else that I can become better at is, and I aim to be, one of the best CEOs in the world.
I love it. And I think it's a great idea. I mean, I noticed on your Instagram the other day that you had launched this thing, and I was like, this is a phenomenal idea. I'm happily taken. But to be able to connect on a deeper level, just walking into a relationship, knowing that you're open to the growth, open to the spirituality, open to what this means. And you said something really key is seeing the person for who they are versus reflecting our things back on them. Super key.
And it's not just
for the longest time.
And it's not, it's not a dating app. People are used to dating app, but it's not a dating app. It's literally a relationship app. And so it's for single people and developing a relationship with themselves. It's for people to meet other people, friends, romantic, whatever. But we also have a section for relationship building. And so that's really what we're most excited about is understanding yourself is definitely a prerequisite. It's part of the process, because if you don't know yourself, how are you going to find a partner? How are you going to find your complement? The next is, we help people connect to other open-minded, like-minded people that are on a similar journey. But the true work in relationship is that even if you find your perfect mate, is process, is process. And so the relationship building is where we find people really need the most guidance. And I think astrology, because as far as it maps out timing of when these processes and gives us perspective on what's the context and purpose of these processes. And I think so many of these processes, like I said before, manifest in our bonded relationships. And so it's romantic relationships, it's relationships with close friends, with parents, siblings, children.
That's awesome.
It really is, again, in all our relationships, seeing who's really there.
Oh, dude, I love it, man. So one thing I do is I wrap up every single interview with the same question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, the question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Biggest moment of growth is I was living in Northern California, and I realized I just failed my third drug test. And it seemed like I had really just ruined everything in my life. And there was this moment where I just sat on the couch and just sat with the pain of the potential of I just squandered all of everything in my life, and I think the courage to sit in that pain, I grew up really quickly after that. And as I sat in it, I started, got deep enough in it, I started to clearly see a potential way out. And I think that was the biggest moment of growth in my life.
I love it, man. Ricky, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your passions with my audience, man. This has been phenomenal. I hope to have you on again in the future. We'll have you on next time as the greatest CEO in the world. Super excited about that, man. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.